Dean Bowles here, and thanks everybody for coming out on a Tuesday evening. Um, no doubt a busy time for everyone, whether you're coming off club meets in the last couple of weeks, or whether it's a regional championship, or whether you're getting ready to go on a camp. Uh, Many of those things are taking place in the next couple of weeks. And not to forget that the hosted OAGs this weekend, both in Markham and in TPAS. Anyways, thank you to all who were on hand providing that performance moment for the swimmers this past weekend, whether in Markham or in TPAS. Greatly appreciate it. Note to coaches regarding the OAGs, Swim Ontario provided Race Tech race services with race video capture from the finals. And you should be able to find a link to see those videos, and hopefully you'll use them to help continue their performance improvement. As well, a reminder to complete the OAG feedback survey. We appreciate your feedback, and we will be moving forward with a debrief, and then moving forward and making whatever necessary modifications perhaps for the OSCs that will be taking place in July. Shout out to some of the staff that are on the call. Darren's here. Heather Bruce, obviously, she's on the docket to speak. I think I saw Karen's name out there. Ali Gurr, our events promotions coordinator. He is going to be running the show from the background tonight. I'm not sure if any other staff, and I'm not sure if any board members are here, but I know that Andy Mitchell, Swim Ontario president, is here. And Andy, I'll turn it over to you to have a couple words, and then we'll get on with presentations tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dean. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for attending. These conversations are an important tool in learning from each other, and it really does help us develop best practices. I want to thank in advance our presenters who are going to be talking to us tonight. First of all, about ONCA and some of the consequences arising out of that legislation, and then a really good discussion about grassroots development and how clubs should be supporting that. I want to echo Dean's thanks to Swim Ontario staff for organizing the session and for handling the logistics to make this all happen. And in closing, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We have a tendency to sometimes to talk about the negative of things, and today probably was a generally negative day in many spheres. But I just wanted to say three things about swimming that I think really talk to the importance and the success of our sport. We have this year over 12,000 competitive swimmers swimming in Ontario. When you think about that, that's an amazing number. And those are the lives that everybody on this call and around the sport are shaping in important ways as they move forward in their lives. Secondly, and it was mentioned, our age group championships last weekend were I think it would be fair to say were fully subscribed. In part, that speaks to the fact of the performance levels of our swimmers. They are achieving amazing things in the pool each and every day. And finally, I want to make a comment that I think is really apropos. And that is that Ontario swim decks are inhabited by great people. They're dedicated men and women to the development of swimmers, and they are the backbone of what makes swimming, I believe, the greatest sport in Ontario and in Canada. So with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters. Again, thanking them and thanking all of you for being here this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I think Darren probably will introduce Steve from Sport Law, and we'll get underway. Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, Dean. I'd like to obviously introduce Steve Indig, who's the principal founder of Sport Law. Steve has been working with swim clubs for probably more than 20 years now. I know Steve and I go way back. Steve's a former coach, a former swimmer, and has decided to I guess, make his adult life into helping swim clubs navigate the various uh, things to navigate in sport. And Steve's here to talk to us about the not-for-profit legislation and clubs' responsibilities around the not-for-profit legislation. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Darren. And my last official coach was Mr. Dean Bowles as well. So little shout out there. The presentation is going to be shared. Did you want me to do that?
That will be awesome if you want.
You want me to do it? Okay. Was not ready for that. I can just talk. Okay, and I can share it. You could send it out to everybody. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Dean and Darren, for the introduction. As they both alluded to, I've had a long history with swimming, both as an athlete, a coach, and a professional over the last 40 years, give or take. And one of the things that I always kind of said was the evolution of sport law continues to exist, and one of the new gifts that we have is the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. So it's the new legislation that came into effect in October 19, 2021. It replaces the Ontario Corporations Act. The original piece of legislation was written in 1907, so a few things that have, of course, changed over the last 100 years. And ONCA, the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, was specifically designed for not-for-profits. The old legislation included for-profits, insurance companies, and now we have our own piece of legislation. When it was created back in 2010, we were told that we would have 2 years notice of implementation and then 3 years to transition from the old to new pieces of legislation. What ended up happening, we were given about 2 weeks notice of implementation and then 3 years notice of transition. So the actual completion of the transition date was October 19th, 2024. So if you are a registered not-for-profit company, corporation, and if you don't know, I can find out for you pretty easily, and I'm happy to put my contact information in the chat. If you don't transition by the end of the 3 years, which finished 5 months ago, you are deemed to have transitioned to the new legislation. And what that means is the provisions of the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act will prevail over your bylaws, over your articles of incorporation, over your letters patent. And in those situations, you end up what I call the gray zone. Well, your bylaws say notice of a meeting is 60 days. No, ONCA says it's 50 days. So ONCA will prevail. And if you sent it out 60 days, you're over the prescribed period of 50 days. Therefore, technically, it might not be a binding meeting. So there are lots of different obligations that ONCA has on you that we want to make sure you align with that. Some of you have done your own research on ONCA. If you move forward about 4 slides, you'll get to where I'm talking about. You'll get to where I'm talking. If those of you who have done any sort of research on ONCA, it's the next slide. Yeah, right there. If any of you have done research on ONCA, you will know that the Ontario government put out a set of default bylaws. And if you do not transition, you are not subject to the default bylaws. The default bylaws only apply to new corporations that do not adopt bylaws within 60 days. So if you've done nothing and think that you just apply to the default bylaws, that's not the case. In order to be ONCA compliant, you have to do 2 things, minimum 2 things. You have to file articles of amendment with the ministry telling the government we are moving from old act to new act. And you also have to update your bylaws to comply with that new legislation. Yes, you can use the default bylaws as a starting point. I just advocate, please read them. I don't think they work well for sport. There are a lot of minimal provisions in there that, again, I don't think work for larger clubs like an Etobicoke or a NIAC. The default provision in the bylaws is a quorum of a members meeting is majority. Well, some that could be hundreds of people, if not thousands of people. So you really have to make sure that if you are going to use the default bylaws, that it works for your organization. If you move to the next slide, the next important piece about ONCA is understanding the Ontario Business Registry. So when ONCA was created and went live in October of 2021, everything that a corporate entity, including not-for-profits, is now being done online. In order to access the Ontario Business Registry, you need a 9-digit company key. To get that company key, you have to go to a specific website, which I've indicated here, and you have to tell them your last registered address with the ministry. It could be an email address, it could be a physical address. And what they do is they mail or email that 9-digit code to that address. Well, if it happens to be the last president's address from 12 years ago who's no longer affiliated with the club, it's going to be sent there. So that's another area in which you have to pay attention to, is to be able to get that company key. If you don't know your address or your email, we can help do that through an electronic filing service. There's a small fee, it's like under $100 to update your corporate filings, and then we get that key. Once we have the key, you or me or anybody can get into your online corporate profile, file your annual return, file your articles of amendment, update the address, update the email, update the director's board composition. So it's really important, to be honest with you, you can't transition without the 9-digit code. So you need to get the 9-digit code to start the process. Those of you who haven't updated your registry, you should, particularly those on the call tonight who are board members. When you become a board member, you should be listed as a director with the ministry. But more importantly, you should be taken off when you're no longer affiliated with your not-for-profit entity. I've had clients serve with litigation papers for an organization they had nothing to do with for over a decade. And the reason they were served was they were still listed on the corporate registry as a director. And when we want to sue, us idiot lawyers, we pull the corporate profile and we see who the directors are. And that's who we decide to serve. So we want to make sure your filings are up to date. At minimum, you have to file an annual return. You have to tell the ministry every year, is your address the same? Is your email the same? Is the board composition the same? So we do that through an annual return. And anytime there is another change, you have 14 days to file what's called a notice of change. So those are two really important documents. And I want to be clear, that notice of change is not your tax return. Okay, what your accountant or auditor does for you is different than what somebody like me would do. They are two separate things. So your accountant will likely be filing your annual tax return or your annual tax filings, but not the documents that I'm speaking about. Really important to do that. If you go to the next slide, some of the high-level issues that we want to talk about. Membership structure and voting rights now must be defined in the Articles of Incorporation, your letters patent, your Articles of Amendment. The government hasn't done a great job in explaining this, because when you pull the form down from their site, it says special provisions, other. Well, guess where all this goes? In the other. So what we want to do is update your bylaws to understand who your membership structure is, their voting rights, and literally copy and paste it into the Articles of Incorporation. To complete ONCA transition, as I said before, members have to approve the bylaws, members have to approve the Articles of Amendment. The bylaws do not get filed with the ministry, the articles do. A third requirement is we also have to include a dissolution clause in the articles. So if there's $1 million in the bank, and the club decides it no longer wishes to exist, what happens to that $1 million? The default provision in legislation is equally amongst the members. I have to admit, I'm not a fan of that. I could be a member of NIAC for 10 years, pay in thousands of dollars into that organization, and then they dissolve when I'm no longer affiliated with the club and I get nothing. So usually we recommend that on dissolution, monies are donated to a third party, another not-for-profit organization or charity. ONCA allows you to have a minimum and maximum number of directors, which is something I actually recommend. You know, you can have a fixed number, but You can have a min and a max, and we can define that in the bylaws. It's not a significant change. It was in the old legislation, but nobody really paid attention to it, was directors have to be elected. There is no such thing as acclamation. So I'll pick on Darren. If Darren's the only person running for a board spot, we still have to say all in favor, cast a ballot. Do you want Darren as a director? And he needs to ascertain a majority vote. I've actually been at a meeting where there was one person running and the members actually said no. And luckily for me, sarcasm, I was the scrutineer and I got to make that announcement in front of 150 people. But it's really important that the members still have the right to say no to a potential director if that's not one that they want. Now, we've talked about being a not-for-profit corporation. There's actually a subcategory that ONCA talks about, and it's whether you are a charity, which 99%, if not all of you, are not. The sport organizations at a provincial level cannot get charitable status, but you can be what's called a public benefit corporation, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And there's also greater financial reporting required under ONCA. So if you go to the next slide, as I said before, there are 3 subcategories of not-for-profit corporations. Charitable, which again, most of you, if not all of you, are not. And then the designation we're concerned about is non-charitable public or non-public benefit corporations. So how do I make that distinguishment? It's based on your sources of funds. So to be deemed public benefit corporation, you have to receive $10,000 more of government funds or donations, gifts from non-members, directors, officers, and employees. I'm not talking about registration. I'm talking about Trillium grants, Jumpstart grants, maybe Swim Ontario grants. You have to pay attention to that source of revenue if you hit that $10,000 threshold. And the reason that becomes important, if you go to the next slide, you can see the requirement of audit and auditor is based on, again, 2 things. So revenue, that's total revenue, not profit. So if you're a multi-million-dollar club, that's your revenue. And then the secondary thing I have to look at is, did I get that $10,000 in public funds or not, or gifts from non-members? And you can see here, it's very simple. If I'm a public benefit corporation, I get the $10,000 in Trillium funding, and my revenue is $500,000 or more, I must have an auditor who must do an audit. Now, an audit is going to cost $8,000 to $15,000 depending on the size of your club. That may be an expense that you're not used to spending. So that's something you need to pay attention to. If your revenue is between $100,000 and $500,000, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Most of you are familiar with an ordinary resolution, which is a majority. The second type would be a special resolution, which would be 2/3. Now I'm going to throw a new one at you called extraordinary resolution. It's 80% of votes cast. So if we have our AGM, 10 people show up, I ask for an extraordinary resolution, I need 8 people. What that extraordinary resolution allows you to do is to dumb down the audit requirement. So if your revenue is between 100,000 and 500,000, you can ask for a motion not to do an audit and do a review engagement, which will run you 3,000 to 5,000 and not 8 to 15. And you can see that if you're below 100,000, you can dispense with the audit requirement altogether. Now, if you don't get that $10,000 in public funds, your threshold is much lower or higher, I guess. So if you have $500,000 or less, you can dispense with the review engagement and the audit. And if you're $500,000 or more, you have to do at minimum the review engagement with an auditor. So that's a significant change. I understand that, and it's something that most people. Now, once you've ascertained that designation, you will have it for 2 years at minimum. And it's something you want to work with your accountant on an annual basis to figure out what kind of reporting you have to do. The other significant change, it's not a change, but I'll speak about it because we're talking about finances, is when to have your AGM. ONCA mandates that you have your AGM within 6 months of fiscal year end and present the most completed financial statements. So some of you in the work I've been doing in this area, your fiscal year end is December 31st and you're having your AGM January 14th. There's no way that the auditor is getting the audit done in 14 days. So you have to look at fiscal year end, the date in which you want to have your annual meeting, and that 6-month requirement by legislation to have that completed. If you go to the next slide, again, a significant change to probably what you're used to. Bylaw amendments are now ordinary resolution, except an amendment to your articles, not your bylaws, your articles of incorporation listed herein requires a 2/3 vote. So obviously it's very high level things. Change the corporation's name, changing your purposes, creating a new class and adding a new class into the articles. Those require 2/3, but all other changes to your bylaws is an ordinary resolution. So what do I do? What do I do? How do I do this? You can try and do it yourself. I've worked with Dean and Darren and the staff at Swim Ontario. We've created a template that you can ask the office for and fill in some of the gaps. I do see sometimes people take a lot of latitude in the amendments they want to make, and some of them aren't legally compliant or in line with ONCA. If you can go to the next slide, please. So what you want to do is get your company key, track down your articles of incorporation, figure out what kind of structure you want to have moving forward, update your bylaws and your articles and get them filed. We offer 3 services in this area. One is we just oncify your documents and make sure they're legally compliant. Option 2 is, wow, your bylaws are really bad. We'd like to give you new ones. Option 3 is option 1 or 2 with a governance conversation, talking about membership, voting rights, board structure, terms, portfolios, really getting into the nuances of the governance of the organization. But again, you don't need to work with us. There are lots of people available, and again, you can do this on your own if you do know what you're doing. But I do highly recommend it. It's, you know, bylaws are something that I look at, unfortunately, a lot. Most of you probably never look at them, which is not a terrible thing. But when you do need them, you want to make sure they're in support of what you want to do and what you want to govern. I was speaking to a colleague of mine at 5 o'clock, and he attended an AGM on behalf of a soccer club on Saturday, and 400 people showed up. And there was obviously some contentious issues that were being brought to the forefront. So having good governing documents is really crucial. So get your company key, track down your documents, and decide on which way you want to move. But please, I kind of beg of you, don't stay in the gray zone where your bylaws will conflict with the act, because every one of you has what I like to call this person or that person in your club who knows Robert's rules, who knows your bylaws, who knows governance, and they're the ones who like to bring that to your attention. So I do advocate to get this done, particularly because the deadline has passed. So I'll stop there. I'll put my contact information in the chat, and please feel free to ask questions. I see some in the chat. Maybe, I'm not sure who wants to play host here. One question that came in was about a quote for a review. There was a 3,000 to 5,000. Are we asking for the wrong thing? So the short answer to that is, you need to figure out what kind of corporation you are. Are you public benefit or non-public benefit? And then you'll have the ability to decide what kind of review or audit you want, or compilation. Some organizations, if they're not mandated to do an audit, they'll do one every 3 or 4 years just to make sure and prove to the membership that everything's kosher. But I would ask what kind of corporation you are, and then we figure out what kind of audit you want to do. Are there costs associated with that sort of consulting advisory service? Yes, unfortunately, this is how I make my living. I would say from a fees perspective, our costs range from I'll say $700 to $2,500, depending on where you are in the governance structure and the work you want to do. The hard costs, there's a $130 filing fee to file your articles of amendment with the ministry. So whoever does the work will have to pay that. But our fees, again, depending on which option you want to undertake, range from that $750 to $2,500. If we get that $2,500 mark, we really had way too many conversations, and we're probably on draft number 7. So, you know, there are ways of simplifying it to keep the costs down. Any other
Steve,
questions? Yeah, go.
I had a question on behalf of the club. So, Swimathon fundraising would count towards public benefit corporation status, would it not?
It would, because it's a gift from non-members, right? So the Swimathon, the Trillium, you know, if you're charging fees or you're raising money through the club itself, so, you know, if, as a member and I give $100, that wouldn't count technically because I'm a member. But if I got money from my, you know, my parents and my in-laws and my cousins, that would count for sure. Yeah, it's interesting, Darren. It's a really great question. I had one client actually get $10,000, and because they got that $10,000, they had to do an audit. That cost them 15. So they actually decided the following year not to accept the grant because it was costing them too much money. So it is something to pay attention to for sure. I know another conversation piece about the remuneration of directors has come up. So can you pay a director? The answer is yes, you can. Legally, under ONCA, a director can be paid. The legislation actually says that the remuneration amount will be fixed by the directors. I actually don't really love that because they decide how much they get paid. I would probably look to have it affirmed by the membership if it's a you know, a nominal amount to offset the amount of time and effort that goes into being a director. What if directors donate but are also members? What do those dollars count as? They just count as revenue. So they would not be counted towards the $10,000 threshold we're talking about. It would just be counted as revenue. And if you're deemed non-public benefit, meaning you don't get the $10,000, the amount of money we want to pay attention to is $500,000 in revenue. Once I hit $500,000, I have to do an audit, or I can get that extraordinary resolution to do a review. So I really think it's something that all of you should contemplate putting as a standing item agenda at your AGM. Like, why pay the additional accounting fees unless you really want to? So I would always be asking for that extraordinary resolution to, I say dumb it down. I'm sure there's a better phrase to it than that, but to do a less onerous review. Somebody asked a question about OLG money. Again, I see that as being counted towards that $10,000. I mean, OLG is a government-funded agency. Yes, I understand you work for it, but I too have spent many hours in the bingo parlors coming out smelling like a pack of cigarettes. That was a long time ago, but I do have memories of those. I do think that would fall under the that fee. A raffle brings in $30,000. Would it count towards the 10,000? Yes, it would. I'm gonna type my my contact information here, and if anybody doesn't feel comfortable asking a question in public, feel free to pop me an email. Yes, your status will change depending on your revenue and sources of grants. I know it's not annually. I don't know it off the top of my head whether it's 2 years or 3 years. I can probably figure that out by the time we're done here.
I have a bit of a particular question related to that director's donation to a club. If a director, we have some club members that are directors and they have private businesses and they donate through their business to the club. does that count towards the 10,000, or does that count technically as a member donating to the club?
Well, I mean, I've written my fair share, Chris, of bylaws, and I would say most members don't include corporate entities. So your member is likely the swimmer or their parent. So I would still say, unfortunately, yeah, that falls outside of it. One of the things that I do think it's important to distinguish is it a donation? Is it a gift? Or is it sponsorship? Right? Because sponsorship is a business relationship. I'm going to give you $5,000. You're going to put my logo on everybody's swim cap.
Right.
Right? That's a business relationship. So I do think you can make a distinguishment.
Okay, so those sponsorships then don't count as the donation amount or a true
That's-
gift, and therefore towards the 10,000. That's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Steve, there is a question from Whitby about volunteer credits. So the way that works is there's a mandatory fundraising fee, for example, and people can work off those volunteer credits by officiating or doing other things. Does that count as compensation?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, it would be revenue if you don't do your volunteer hours and I, as a member, have to pay an additional couple $100 because I didn't volunteer enough, that would just increase your revenue, but it would be monies from members.
Any other questions?
Great.
I just wanted, sorry, Darren, I'm looking it
Yeah.
up. I think the designation is on an annual basis, so you just have to watch it yearly. I don't think you get stuck with it for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So Kyle had a question. Yes, the presentation is being recorded and it will be available on the website in a couple of days. And then is a hosting grant a business relationship? So for example, if a club is hosting a Swimming Canada meet or a Swim Ontario provincial meet, and there's a local organizing committee agreement, is that a business relationship, or would that be counted as grant money coming from?
No, I would try and make the argument that it's a business relationship. I mean, again, like the accounting questions are probably better to go through your accountant, but my gut tells me that, if you get a hosting subsidy or something like that, it would just be a part of your business relationship in running the meet. We could, phrasing is important, right? And contracts are important. So I would look at it from that perspective. But I do think it's super important to pay attention to that threshold, and is it worth to your club to ascertain that revenue? I know in working with a lot of the swim clubs to date, bingo money was huge for them. I think a lot of them were making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. So to pay a couple extra grand to do an audit or review, it made sense to them. But again, I did have one client who got 10 and spent 15, and that didn't make sense to them. There was an HST question. If charging a fee, do you need to consider charging HST? Again, that's probably a better question for an accountant. Most youth clubs are exempt from charging HST, but I would clarify that with someone who has a CPA and not an LLB. Thanks, Darren and Dean and everybody for entertaining bylaw conversations. I know it can be dry. If you Google ONCA, you'll get lots of resources. If you go to our website at sportlaw.ca and in the top right-hand corner, you say ONCA, you'll get lots of articles about it too. And again, if anybody has a question, I'm happy to answer it. So thanks everybody. As Andy said, swimming's very close to me, and I really appreciate everybody being here and what you do. So thank you personally and professionally.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate all the sage advice you bring to us and our members. So thank you very much. Okay, we're rolling along quite nicely. I think now Heather Bruce, our grassroots development coordinator, she will be delivering some of the activities that she's been doing. Heather's been actively in all the regions, working with coaches to bring a high level of direction and support to those coaches that are at the grassroots. So is Ali steering this?
I think so.
There we go. Okay. Well, thanks, Heather, for bringing this. And I know you're going to have a little bit of maybe overlap with our next, with Naomi Patterson of the Collingwood Clippers, who's the president of the Clippers. And there's going to be some overlap as you go through the next little bit. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Good evening, everybody. My name is Heather, as Dean said, and I will start tonight with a presentation of what I've been up to over the past few months with our grassroots coaches. And then Naomi will take over with a more interactive portion of the evening. Ali, you can switch to the next slide. So as you can see, I have had the pleasure of traveling all over Ontario, conducting what I call Grassroots Leadership Training Days, or GLT Days. I chose to focus on our youngest emerging coaches because they are on the front lines and they shape the future of our sport by coaching our youngest swimmers. It's been really inspiring to witness their enthusiasm, their active engagement, and their growth during these sessions. As you can see, I was in a variety of locations, but they weren't restrictive to the regions. Bordering regions were invited to attend. So for example, in Richmond Hill, I had a number of coaches from Huronia attend, and actually it was the same case for Brampton. And then in the Milton one, I invited, that was a combination of Central Region and Western Region. And Brockville, you are coming up soon, so make sure that you register soon. So I'm excited to share my journey with you this evening and demonstrate how these training days not only develop leadership skills, but also build a stronger, more connected coaching community. Ali, next slide. So the training is in person, it's collaborative, it's hands-on, it's designed primarily for the emerging coaches. Although I've had participants from other roles in their clubs, they've also attended. It's led by coaches who specialize in grassroots development, who are passionate about sharing their expertise. These sessions address gaps left by the NCCP 101 by focusing on timely, relevant topics from coaching best practices to managing parent relationships. They reflect real-world challenges and that coaches encounter every day. Again, the emphasis is on in-person. It's in-person interaction, and it builds a strong sense of community and camaraderie that virtual sessions just can't match. And to make the experience even more enjoyable, each session includes a free lunch, a swag bag, and a lot of candy to get through the day. In that slide, you can see there is a group in Uxbridge on the far left, Dave Tontini leading a session in Milton, and the far picture are coaches up and working together in small groups in Collingwood. Okay, Ali, next slide. Coaches emerge from these training days more confident and better equipped to handle the real-world challenges of coaching. They build valuable support networks with their peers, transforming coaching into a more sustainable and fulfilling career path. These sessions empower coaches by boosting confidence and fostering a proactive coaching mindset. We deliver the message that every coach at every level in the club is important and plays a vital role of the swimmer's journey. So we talk a lot about first impressions. We talk a lot about being confident in who they are as young people and in the amount of knowledge they have around coaching. The training also enhances skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and creative leadership. With a long-term vision in mind, we're investing in grassroots leaders today, which secure the future success of our swim clubs, ensuring that every coach contributes to a stronger, more connected, forward-thinking community. So in these pictures, we have young coaches from Oakville in our Brampton training. And then Brett Russell has them up and moving with the importance of fun in Uxbridge in that middle picture. And in the top picture, that's Caleb Calling leading a session on best practices in Milton. Next slide. So the training is built around active learning, where coaches can engage in hands-on sessions that mirror everyday challenges. Throughout these sessions, experienced facilitators provide direct mentorship and guidance. The sessions are designed to be engaging, featuring interactive group discussions, scenario-based exercises, and problem-solving workshops. It's a mix of large group and small group activities, and it's high energy all day, and it encourages active participation. So you can see in the top right picture, that is Koji in the Richmond Hill training, where he was facilitating an hour on best practices for coaching 12 and under swimmers. And he had the coaches write their names on sticky notes. And he started the hour by having them jump as high as they could and sticking the sticky note on the wall. He ended the hour asking them to try and beat that sticky note. And inevitably they did. They beat their sticky note. And it was teaching them that although they think they're giving their all in the first round, they actually weren't. There's more to give. So when they're showing up on the pool deck at the end of a long day, thinking about exams, tests, relationships, something that happened at school, to remember to stop and think about how much they're giving and give a little bit more. So it's a great active exercise for teaching best practices. Recognizing that every community has unique needs, the training is customized based on regional requirements. So you can see down in the far left, that was up in Fort Frances. So geography plays a role in the northern regions, and we did a 2-day training up there where we had swim meet on one day, a grassroots swim meet. The next morning, we had a traditional regional camp for the swimmers. During the regional camp, Janet Hislop and I did a parent presentation on what grassroots swimming means. And then at the end of the camp, I had the coaches stay behind and I did a workshop on the importance of fun. And then we all went on our way. And then you can see in the next picture over, we in Sudbury, again, geographical needs, we did a 2-day grassroots leadership training where I brought Andrew Craven and Ron Campbell with me, and we did classroom training for the Saturday, and we ended the day in the pool, and we had the coaches get in their bathing suits, and we did dive progressions and what Andrew and Ron felt were the most important drills for grassroots. It was phenomenal, and we received amazing feedback for that one. And then you can see in the last picture next to the Sudbury one, that was on the pool deck at Collingwood. So in the morning, we did grassroots leadership training. In the afternoon, we continued in the classroom, but at the same time, we brought in a camp, a traditional regional camp with swimmers. And I had the young coaches go out on the deck, and I called them the deck detectives, and they observed the coaches running the camp with a checklist, and they went through the checklist to see if they were meeting all the requirements of the deck detective game. And actually that was phenomenal because they were they were surprised to see that coaches, higher level coaches, were actually doing what we were talking about in the classroom. So it was a great experience. So the programs are always responsive and flexible, and they ensure that they're both practical and engaging, driving the collective success wherever they are. Ali, next slide, please. So an incredible side effect of these training days is the empowerment of our facilitators. They step out of their comfort zone by tackling topics and expanding their expertise through delivery of fresh insights. They embrace these opportunities, finding their untapped strengths and leaving them energized and their confident and proud of their contributions. Their leadership not only enriches their own professional journeys, but it also sets a great example for the young coaches. Even if the session isn't perfect, and sometimes they're not, facilitators want to return to refine their presentations, gradually elevating their delivery to what I consider conference quality excellence. So you can see down below, you have Kim and Ian there doing a selfie. I had to beg them to come and do this. They were so nervous, but I actually do call them the dynamic duo. They've since spoken at the Swim Ontario conference, and they were amazing. And it just took them some time to get over that hump and do the training. And the next picture to them, Tyson McDonald, he's one who wanted to keep coming back and try his presentation again and again, to the point where it's refined so well that the coaches in the room he's a para athlete, and the coaches in the room are not only learning about how to coach para athletes, but they're relating to him and his journey, because his story is unique but emotional enough that they understand it. And he's just amazing. So he actually travels a lot with me to do the facilitation throughout the province. And then the final picture on this slide is Colette Wilson, who I found up in Sudbury at a swim meet. She's a teacher in North Bay, and she came into the Sudbury training and gave amazing practical advice on the importance of fun. So again, this is something I'm really, really proud of, because it is a nice side effect of these training days, because it's community learning at its very best. It's a dynamic cycle of growth, empowerment, and shared success. Next slide, please. So the feedback from these trainings has been overwhelmingly positive. Many coaches actually return repeatedly. They come back for more. They're energized by the experience, and it also helps actually to have the swag bags and the free lunch. It really does keep them wanting to come back for more, and they do love that part. Nearly every coach has expressed again the strong preference for in-person sessions over virtual ones. They value the networking, the community building, and the face-to-face interactions that these days provide. It has been really, really inspiring for me to see entire club staff show up, from presidents to the age group leads to grassroots and head coaches. They come together and they participate and learn as one team. And final slide, Ali. So at the end of the training, before they can get their swag bag, the coaches have to scan a QR code, and they give me feedback immediately. So this is a copy and paste of just one of the feedback forms from throughout the province. And but I have many, many, many other testimonials that are very similar. And it clearly demonstrates that these sessions are essential for the continuous development of our coaches and community building. The key to the success of these, though, is to get the coaches in the room where they can actually experience this in person. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Naomi to talk about how to get them into the room. Ali, you can switch off. Yeah, thanks. Naomi, it's all yours.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. Thanks for that thumbs up. Okay, that's great. And so I'm just going to sort of piggyback on everything Heather just talked about, and how do we make this happen? But what I'd like to start with is, if you could just drop in the chat, what is your why? Why do you go to the pool every day? Why are you there? Why do you coach? If you're a board member, why are you on the board? Why do you do that? Why do you volunteer your time? I'm curious to see why we do what we do. Somebody's got to start this. Awesome. For the kids. Love it. Thank you, Kyle. Better the sport for all. Perfect. I love it. And for all means for coaches and for kids as well, to sow good seeds. Awesome. Like for the youth and for our coaches too. What else? Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? More than 3 people on this call. Support the new generation of swimmers. I love it. Give back to the sport that made me who I am today. This is beautiful. I love it. Learn life lessons and personal growth. The best sport to be involved. I love that. Ensure the board is there to govern and staff focus on operations. That's great, Mark. I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? share experience and skills for the betterment longevity of the organization. If everyone does a little bit, oh, beautiful, I love it. The club will be better in the long run. I love it. Being a team, create good people for the future through the sport. This is all great stuff, right? This is what I create good people for the future through the sport. Yes, work together between clubs. This is wonderful. It's wonderful. These are all the things that we do. So I wanted to focus back on what's our why, because why are we here? And we're here for, Rick says, developing friendships, right? Whether it's athletes, whether it's coaches, we're here for the kids. We're here for the sport. We're here for our coaches. We're here for everybody who's involved in the sport of swimming. And that's why we do what we do. That's why we work, an extra 10, 15, 20, 30 hours a week to support this sport, right? That's our why. So Justin, I love this, beauty. I love it, Jackie. Setting an example for the swimmers and guiding them for proper behaviors in society. Yes, we're really gonna talk about that. And somebody says, love the idea of board members going to these coach sessions, which is 100% important. So what's our why? Our why is we're here for the swimmers, we're here for the sport, we're here for the athletes, right? So think about your own job. So if you're a board member, think about your day job. If you're a coach, think about a friend or a family member who has a job in the for-profit world, right? And when somebody is hired, what's the first thing they go through? What's the first thing they do? You hire somebody brand spanking new. They go through training, right? Onboarding orientation, onboarding. Look at this, this is beauty, right? They go through training. So think about this, and how often do we take our high performance swimmers or our senior swimmers and we say, hey, do you want to coach? Awesome. Here's your hiring paperwork. Here's your paycheck. Here, go coach these kids. And do we give them the training that they actually need and they actually deserve? And the answer is probably in most cases, no, we don't, right? Jackie says, no, we don't always do that. You're absolutely right, Jackie. We don't always do that. We presume that because we're a good swimmer, that we can now go and coach these 6, 8, 10, 12-year-old swimmers, and we leave them on the pool deck and we expect them to coach, right? This is why this training is so important, right? So what Heather's doing across the province is incredibly important. And we have all of those grassroots coaches going through that, right? I go work for McDonald's and I begin to flip burgers, but it's more than just flipping burgers, right? It's dealing with customers. It's dealing with issues. It's being able to make on-the-spot decisions, right? And that's the same thing with our grassroots coaches who are on deck every single day. It's not just, here's how you swim freestyle. It's not just, oh, do your shark fin arm, right? It's more than that. It's dealing with behavior. How do I handle children's behavior? I'm 16 years old and I'm now on a pool deck with 8-year-olds. And how do I manage that behavior? How do I get them to be engaged? How do I keep them engaged, right? It's also dealing with parents, right? How do I, when I leave the building, do I walk out of the building with my head down because I'm scared of all these parents? Or do I walk out of the building with my head held high because I coach your child and I have the confidence to say, hey, Eames did a great job today. He worked really hard in his backstroke, right? There's more to it than just dropping some high performance swimmers on a pool deck and letting them coach our youngest swimmers, right? So that piece is incredibly important with what Heather is doing across the province for sure. And then what I'd say to our coaches, if you're a head coach, how often are you on the pool deck with your grassroots coaches? How often are you providing feedback to those grassroots coaches, right? So there's lots of things that in Heather's training we talk about with respect to, do you have your hands in your pockets? Are you chatting? Do you have your AirPods in? What are parents watching right now? And we talk about this a lot. And certainly I don't want to harp on Collingwood, but yes, we do. We've built this great culture. We have like 17 youth coaches, some are paid. A good portion are volunteer. I just had a 13-year-old come up to me today. He said, I just turned 13 2 weeks ago. When can I start coaching? Right. And so we've got this great culture and this great environment, but we're teaching them more than just, I get to teach kids how to swim freestyle, right? We're teaching them, what are parents watching? Right. So parents are in the viewing room. They give us their children. They give us their pride and joy, and they're watching us through the window all the time. So there's so much more to this training that Heather is providing, where we teach the kids, like this is what we do. Are you getting your knees wet? Are you down on the pool deck? Are you talking to the kids? Are you providing feedback? What feedback are you providing? What do I do if somebody isn't doing what I want them to do, right? So much learning. It is not just taking a swimmer and dropping them on the pool deck and saying, go coach these kids, right? And this is what we get from Heather's grassroots training. And it's continuous improvement. So this isn't even just for 16-year-olds. It's for, when we ran our training, we had 30-year-olds come through the training. We had coaches come through the training who have been through the training multiple times, but they recognize that every time they come through, they learn something new. Right. And so they go back. And then as facilitators, it was absolutely incredible with the environment that we had when we ran our program. Was we had facilitators come in who had never facilitated before. They were very, very nervous. They came in, and it was coach development for our head coaches and our assistant coaches. So it's not just about training the grassroots coaches, the younger coaches. We're also developing our head coaches and our assistant coaches by bringing them in and having them share their knowledge and then walk away feeling very, very confident in that. Right. So full and well, like how many minutes, I'm curious, how many minutes does it take to get through Safe Sport Online? Let's take a guess. Somebody's going to drop this in the chat. Oh, it's under an hour. It's okay. Somebody else. So, you know what? I kid you not. These young coaches, 44, Rebecca. Okay. These young coaches can get through Safe Sport Online in less than 20 minutes. Right? It is click, 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 ×2 on my videos. I can take the test as many times as I want, click, 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 right? So, and it's all very exactly, Jackie, and we miss a ton, right? We miss a ton. So we take that information, and through Heather's programming, we pull these kids into a classroom environment, and we talk about those things that are really important, because we know full and well that virtually we're not getting everything we need to get. Right. So those kids can, they know the system. They chat GPT this to the nth degree, right? They know how to work the virtual system, and they can get through those things in no time with just a click. And so we pull those things into this grassroots training, and we engage them, and Heather pulls them in with different activities and all sorts of things. And we get them through this material in a meaningful way that enhances that virtual experience. So in no way, shape, or form are we saying that we're replacing that virtual experience. What we're doing is we're enhancing that virtual experience, because we know that there's a benefit to having these kids in person and having these young adults in person, right? So Mark says, we just made it mandatory for all board members. So yeah, we should absolutely have all board members going through Safe Sport. If we don't have board members who know what's happening in Safe Sport, we need to jump on that for sure. Thanks for that, Mark. That's a great point. So here's my question. So coaches, for sure, coaches, how often are you in the pool deck with your grassroots coaches? Are you providing feedback, or are they there by themselves? Right? There's a huge impact to just being on deck. And so again, I hate to sort of circle back to Collingwood, but I'm on the pool deck with these teenagers multiple times a week. And every single time I'm on the pool deck, I'm like, hey guys, how about this? Hey, how about this? Hey, like split up. Hey, we should be giving this person feedback. Our young adults deserve that from us. They really, really do. Right. So we as adults, I believe, have a huge impact on our youth and how we prepare them for the future. So I recognize that, like, some boards may say, well, we don't have enough money to put our kids through this coaching. And what if they leave anyway? So what if they leave? So what if they leave? We've invested $300 in a young adult who will then become an awesome citizen, an awesome coach somewhere else. Isn't that okay? Right? So we have coaches who, exactly, what if they leave? What if they stay? Who cares, right? Great, Mark. I love that. We have coaches like we have a great coach right now in Collingwood that came out of Guelph, and she's fantastic. And you know what? We didn't spend a penny on Emily. Guelph did, but we've got her now. But that's okay, right? Because we support each other. Like there's a wealth of knowledge, and we need to spread that wealth, and we need to support each other. And so what I ask, if you're a board member, what I say is, what are you spending money on, right? Because we need to spend money on the people who take care of our athletes. So we all said, what was our why? And our why was the kids. Our why was our culture. Our why was the sport. And in order to enhance our sport, and in order to develop our swimmers, we need to spend money on the people who take care of those kids.